Ever since the release of Resident Evil 9, I've been hearing legitimate talk about Capcom remaking the original game. To the uneducated viewer like yourself, you may be confused why this is even a topic of contention. Why not remake the original? Well, my friends, the reason this remake seems like such an odd choice is because they already remade the original. That's right, Resident Evil 1 already got a remake. The gameplay on screen now is from the 2002 remake of Resident Evil. It may seem very dated, but this is the game it was remaking. Much easier to spot the difference now, right? Opinions are admittedly mixed about the prospect of another remake, and for good reason. The 2002 version is fantastic and holds up surprisingly well even for today's standards. Another remake seems like a cash grab and could be replacing actual new games in the franchise. I'm here to disprove that idea and explain why I think that Resident Evil 1 does deserve another remake. For anybody that may be unfamiliar with the franchise, Resident Evil is a survival horror game that was released on March 22nd, 1996 for the PlayStation 1. To most modern gamers, the format would be completely foreign. I know it was for me. The game is shown to you through fixed camera angles, as opposed to the consistent third and first person ones that we are used to today. The fixed camera angles added a unique sense of tension, however, hiding from the player whatever is hiding around the next corner. The game was later remade in 2002, featuring updated graphics and minor tweaks to the gameplay. That is where the game sits today. Resident Evil went on to have dozens more games, including 8 more mainline titles. It hasn't always been that straightforward though. In 2019, Capcom went back and remade Resident Evil 2, but this was far from the same as its predecessor. Rather than featuring minor tweaks and gameplay improvements, the RE2 remake was a complete overhaul. Don't believe me? This is gameplay from the original Resident Evil 2, and this is gameplay from the remake. What? Capcom opted to ditch the fixed camera angles and adopt a much more modern look. The game roughly follows the same storyline as the original, but it tells it in a completely different way. Resident Evil 3 and 4 went on to receive the same overhaul, giving them similar looks to the modern releases in the series. These remakes were extremely beneficial, bringing the franchise back into the modern spotlight. Not only that, it made the games much more consistent with each other. With the exception of 5 and 6, every mainline title had a similar look and feel. And that leaves the original. Suddenly, it makes a lot more sense why this game would need an overhaul. A newcomer to the franchise may start with the original game and be met with graphical whiplash when they boot up the second. Frankly, it's bad for the franchise. Not giving new players a modern way to experience where it all started can end up turning away new fans before they even get started. A remake would solve this issue, bringing the original story into the modern light. Resident Evil is one of the most important horror games ever made, and yet the beginning of the story is locked behind a style of gameplay many modern players simply won't touch. This is nothing new, of course. We see this with other franchises like Silent Hill, but I can speak from personal experience when I say that seeing my only option being Silent Hill 2 completely turned me off from the franchise. I want to start from the beginning, not one game late. This problem is exemplified tenfold in Resident Evil's case, because the original game is a completely different gameplay style from the rest of the series. This makes it stick out like a sore thumb, and even if you have the option to play the original, you're not going to want to if you're a fan of the rest of them, because it's not even close to the same. This alienates a good portion of the audience, and splits the group of Resident Evil fans into two. One group that really loves the originals, and one group that really loves the modern. When comparing this to Silent Hill, it's much easier to see why this one needs a remake. Silent Hill 2 Remake is a good remake, of course, but it still keeps the same core gameplay mechanics of the original. In Resident Evil's case, all of the modern remakes have completely changed the style and gameplay of the original ones. This puts even more of a microscope on the first one, showing how badly it needs an update. Without a remake, the first game doesn't feel like it's from the same series, and that's a problem that I think needs to be fixed. Consistency is not the only reason this remake should happen. There are story problems too. For example, did you know it's physically impossible to achieve the canon ending in Resident Evil 1? That's right, no matter what ending you acquire in that game, it isn't canon to the rest of the series. There are 4 major protagonists: Jill, Chris, Barry, and Rebecca. In order to achieve the canon ending, the player would need to ensure that all 4 characters survive, as all of them reappear later in the series. Unfortunately, that just isn't possible, as no matter what you do, somebody will die. Even now, I cannot wrap my head around this gameplay decision. It feels unnecessary, confusing, and convoluted. A remake would finally be able to correct these mistakes, giving players the true ending, and making things finally make sense. Many people can and have made the argument that from a story perspective, Resident Evil 2 is a fine place to start. I can't lie, that's a valid point. RE2 brings a polished and terrifying introduction to Raccoon City, Leon, and the zombie outbreak that started it all. That's not enough though. While 2 is a great introduction, it fails to introduce players to many important characters in the series' future. These characters include Chris Redfield, who has prominent screen time in Resident Evil 7 and 8, 2 of the modern releases, Jill Valentine, who appears again in RE3, and of course Wesker, who is an overarching antagonist in many of the games. Without the first game, players don't become acquainted with these names, and it will leave them lost in the future. Resident Evil Requiem brought record-breaking sales for the franchise, undoubtedly bringing in thousands of new players. After playing Requiem, many of these new players may be inclined to go back to the start. Unfortunately, that start can feel dated and frankly unplayable to a lot of modern gamers. My worry is that this could scare away new players and lead to many of them not sticking around for the future of the series. Resident Evil 9 brought a fresh take on the series, combining many elements from the past games, so it's a struggle not to see how much RE1 sticks out like a sore thumb. Before releasing RE10, which has the opportunity to be a huge game in the series, I feel it is important to start by re-establishing where it all started. Capcom has already proven that they know how to bring these games into the modern era. With the success of remakes like Resident Evil 2, 3, and 4, the formula clearly works. So the question isn't whether Capcom can remake the original, the question is whether they're willing to return to where it all started. Because every horror story deserves a proper beginning.